Most Star Wars fans are probably aware of the Jedi High Council, unless they've just entirely skipped the prequel era, I guess. And many are probably also aware of the lower-ranked councils existing in enclaves and academies around the galaxy like the one you visit in Knights of the Old Republic. But what you might not be aware of are the other more specific purpose councils throughout the Jedi Order. So today we're going to be talking about everything but the Jedi High Council. First, we'll start with the regular councils which just aren't high. We see these throughout history, where Jedi satellite outposts or franchise locations throughout the galaxy often had their own governing council, which managed their day-to-day affairs, while still falling under the authority of the High Council on Coruscant. For a galaxy-spanning organization like the Jedi, it makes sense that it wouldn't just be one council of 12 people running the whole organization after all. Most famous among these is the council at the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. This enclave was originally created and run by Master Votos Iaspas, but following his death it was administrated by a new council which you meet in Knights of the Old Republic, including Masters Vandar, Definitely Not Yoda Tokair, Jar Leston, Angry Old Man Vrook Lamar, and Master Dorak. We see this council in a few other places in comic form. Nearly 40 years before Knights of the Old Republic, a few years after the Great Sith War with Exar Kun, Vrook is already on this council in a far less old, although still very angry form, alongside a Selkath, Master Qual, Balanisi, and Stuka Alisio. During the Mandalorian Wars, a few short years before Knights of the Old Republic, we see the council yet again, this time with most of the same makeup as KOTOR itself, but with Balanisi still there instead of Master Dorak. In a Dark Horse forum post, author John Jackson Miller explained that the Dantooine Council's authority actually does stretch beyond just the Dantooine Enclave, which is great because that job sounds kind of boring. Instead, they had some level of authority over the Outer Rim in general, although again still below the Jedi High Council. But there can also be some overlap between the Dantooine Council and the High Council membership on Coruscant. Vandar and Vrook were both members of the High Council at the same time as the Dantooine Enclave Council. It's possible they just shifted back and forth a couple times. Work exchange programs like that can be very helpful in an organization since it encourages learning new skills, like today's sponsor, the like and subscribe button on this video. Other enclaves and academies do seem to have councils whose authority starts and stops at that enclave or academy, subject to the authority of both the High Council and, apparently, the Dantooine Council, or maybe even some other regional council depending on where they are. I think there's evidence in the Legacy-era comics to suggest that this is the kind of council that Kakruk was on even before the purge of the Legacy era, but I'd have to dig back through the comics to support that, and I can't seem to find what gave me that impression right now. The biggest example of these, which I'm definitely not making up, does also come from the Old Republic era though, where the Terrace Academy was run by another council, composed of Masters Lucian Dre, Canilia, Ronati, Feln, and Shamar. Unfortunately, putting this group in charge of a school turned out to be a horrible idea, though. These masters belonged to a secret sect of Jedi, the Jedi Covenant, who were dedicated to preventing the return of the Sith. Visions had shown them an impending war with the Mandalorians and Sith, where the Sith menace of their visions were wearing environmental suits similar to what their own Padawans wore on the mission that they were currently on, leading to the logically sound conclusion that the only way to prevent their visions coming to pass was to massacre their own students at the Terrace Academy, which they then did, except for one who got away, Lucian Dre's Padawan, Zane Carrick. This was likely not standard procedure for these local academies, but again, it's one of the few examples that we actually see in practice. Another more modern example of academy councils was at the Almas Academy, established 177 years before the Battle of Yavin in the Kularan system, intended to keep an eye on the Sith fortress of Darth Revan, a Sith whose name was inspired by a corruption of text saying Revan, and who, whenever I mention them, always leads to me getting comments saying I'm pronouncing Revan wrong, so I really have to stress that this is a different guy. This is Riven, not Revan. The school operated under some different principles from the rest of the Order, including allowing the training of students who were much older than normal, so technically Qui-Gon could probably have just brought Anakin over here and it wouldn't have been a problem. The Almas Academy's council included 6 members, the 5 head instructors of the academy, plus the headmaster or headmistress. At the time of the Clone Wars, the headmaster was Lanius Kel Burtuk, and the council also included Masters Fortashel, Jarahi, Tiamuntiro, and 3 others. Most famously, the Almas Academy practiced an act of defiance during the Clone Wars, but not quite one on the same level as what Terrace did. When the Clone Wars started, the Jedi Council sent a former Almus student, Darius Jet, to call the Almus Academy members into service with the Grand Army, but the Academy invoked the right of denial, a means by which Jedi could protest a High Council decision, keeping them out of the war, although invoking the right was highly controversial and required the Jedi to surrender their lightsaber, remaining Jedi really only in name. On top of these administrative councils, other Jedi Councils existed to serve specific purposes within the Order. Most, if not all, of the ones that we ever hear about operated directly within the Jedi Temple on Coruscant as well. A council chamber occupied at least each of the outer spires in the Coruscant Jedi Temple, and each of those was home to a different council. These included the Councils of First Knowledge, Reconciliation, and Reassignment. The Council of First Knowledge, sitting atop the Tower of First Knowledge, were basically responsible for the care, accumulation, and protection of Jedi holocrons, along with the eradication of Sith teachings. The council consisted of 1 permanent member, the Caretaker of First Knowledge, along with 4 other rotating members, elected from within the Jedi serving that department. They had authority over the Jedi Library, working with the Chief Librarian, though the Chief Librarian was not necessarily always a council member. So Jocasta Nu was potentially a member at one point, though not definitely. The Caretaker of First Knowledge around the time of the Clone Wars, who definitely was a member, was a master named Astal Vilbum. Next was the Council of Reconciliation, responsible for the management of the diplomatic missions of the Jedi, as well as dealing with the internal allegations of dark side activity, as they did when Quinlan Vos was alleged to have fallen to the dark side. Qui-Gon reports to them on certain diplomatic incidents in Cloak of Deception, as they were responsible for coordinating Jedi resources in those situations, as well as taking reports from Jedi on those types of missions. This council also had 5 members, of whom 2 were permanent while 3 others were elected to 5-year terms. Although when the council was introduced in Cloak of Deception and the Republic comics, it seems more as if this body was meant to be much more ad hoc, depending on the situation or time period. In some time periods, like parts of the New Sith Wars, the council was dissolved entirely. Cloak of Deception also describes this council chamber as being more casual than the formal seating arrangement of the High Chamber, lacking the same rings of seats, although the Republic Comics appearance of the room shows the exact same seating arrangement. I personally prefer the bring your own chair version, but oh well. Membership on this council was shown to have common overlap with the High Council, given that Oppo Rancisis and Plo Koon were permanent members on both at the same time. And the rotating members we see include exclusively High Council members, so it seems more like a subcommittee with a dedicated room than a separate council altogether. But just because we only see High Council members on this council, it doesn't necessarily mean that that was always the case. Out of universe, you kind of just go with popular characters, and when it comes to Jedi Masters, that means the ones that were just in the movies. Finally, in the main Jedi Temple, we have the Council of Reassignment, once again consisting of 5 members on the same principles as the Reconciliation Council, with 2 permanent ones and 3 elected to 5-year terms. They were responsible for managing students who failed their night trials or weren't picked by a master, as almost happened with Obi-Wan Kenobi. This also left them in charge of the Jedi Service Corps, the branches of Jedi trainees who either specialized in some venture or weren't considered skilled enough with the Force to become knights, in the case of the Agricultural Corps, which was basically when the Jedi failures were sent to live on the farm and no, not in the euphemistic way exercised by the Terrace Masters. We've explained the branches of the Service Corps before in a video about how this almost happened to Obi-Wan, so I won't spend too much time there, but each had their own additional dedicated council as well, and given the Educational Corps were under the Librarians Assembly and Chief Librarian, that likely means there was shared responsibility with the Council of First Knowledge. But now going outside of the Coruscant Jedi Temple, there's another council which gets mentioned in the Legacy era over 100 years after the fall of the Empire in Luke's new Jedi Order, the Jedi Council of Seers, but not the department store. This body was responsible for advising that Cole Skywalker be the one to go on a particular mission, which otherwise would have gone to his older brother Nat. That is, as far as I know, the only mention of them we have in one comic frame. I don't even think they have a Wikipedia page, so we can only really speculate here on what they do, but it seems like they were essentially Jedi focused on meditation and visions to advise other Jedi in various capacities. That's going to do it for today's look at the different Jedi Councils though. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's another topic you'd like to see covered on the channel, or just leave a comment saying whatever else you like. Subscriptions, likes, and comments all help the channel grow. Special thanks to the patrons and channel members whose support makes this kind of video possible, and I hope to see you next time.